So welcome everybody that's here. And for those who are listening later at their own time, um, my name is Leah Lamb, and it is my great honor and joy and pleasure to share what I've come to understand is the treasure box, this world of sacred storytelling. And I'll tell you a little bit of who I am, how I got here, and then we'll all get to play in this beautiful world of story together. And my story really begins, it begins with my parents. My parents they were in the early 70s. They were doing something kind of wild and unexpected, and they decided to go to Africa and drive across the Sahara Desert. And I was conceived in a VW bus in the Sahara Desert. And my parents weren't hippies, just so you know. They were adventurous, but they weren't kind of that hippie culture. And when they came back, and it was a time of war, and they were from New York City, they didn't quite know what to do. There was this Back to the Earth movement, so they went back. They thought they would join that Back to the Earth movement, so they went and they moved onto a farm in Vermont. My dad was a veterinarian. And so I grew up with the land. I grew up on 40 acres of expansive land. There were fields, there were wildflowers, there were creeks, there were trees. Linda talks about the cold of Montreal. It's like, gosh, 6 months of the year is cold. And there's something there that happens where it's like you have this white frozen world for such a long time that really invites this time of retreating and coming inside. And so I had this wild time of getting to spend a lot of time outside, a lot of time in the elements, and a lot of time to really get to know my imagination, because I was an only child for the first 8 years of my life. And I really got an opportunity to listen. And I was very lucky in my life. I'm not going to go through all the details, I promise. I was really lucky in my life. I had parents and people around me who noticed that I had a talent for writing and theater at a very young age. And I got to study with some of the masters. And at a very young age, I got to go, I went off to New York City. My parents gave me this crazy gift. When they saw me applying to every most expensive college in the country, they said, why don't you save our money and your time? And if all you want to do is study acting, then go study acting in New York City. And then when you want an education, we'll talk about it. So I began to learn the business of theater and the business of storytelling in that world. In New York City, I went to study with Sandy Meisner at Neighborhood Playhouse. I worked for Off-Broadway for a couple of years. I worked in summer stock. And I soon realized at a very young age that I was not cut out for that business. And it wasn't where I wanted to be. But something was happening there. And I could feel the pulse of life. I could feel this energy that was happening in the room. And I could feel that we were connecting. There was a sense of community that was creating, the sense of communion between not only the creators and the actors and everyone behind the scenes, but also what they would call the audience, and there was something happening. And I was always curious about what happened when we just opened the door and all of that magic that we created just went right out the door. And I kind of had this question of like, how can I contain that? I wanted to know, like, how do I contain it? So I started walking, with these questions that we walk with when we're young and can wonder about things. And eventually I did go to college, and our very first course was this wilderness orientation class. And I got to it was 3 weeks of being in the wilderness. And once again, I reconnected with my love of land and my love of deep listening in that space that showed me where home really is. And I'm so grateful for those years. I went on to study wilderness leadership and environmental education and experiential education. And it gave me some really extraordinary core skills. And one of it was a relationship with knowing how to walk through the wilderness, how to walk with a light backpack. Skills of problem solving, of group process, of communicating. But that also gave me something else that I wouldn't understand till many, many, many years later, which is it gave me the gift of sitting around a fire. One of the oldest ways we have as humans. And in that space, I started to get introduced to the oldest kind of form of story culture, which is that we were each other's entertainment every night. We'd be out there for 28 days at a time. We were each other's entertainment. And we would sit around the fire every night. And when someone spoke, everyone assumed it's because they had something to say. There was a story that they were going to share. And so they listened, and they listened without interrupting. It's something that we don't have the luxury of, many of us, in our everyday lives. And Corazon, welcome. And the strangest thing is happening with your video. My video is coming on top of your video, and I just want to see you. I'm going to turn off your video, and maybe you can turn it back on, because yeah, if you could turn off your video and turn it back on, maybe it'll stop what it's doing. So this is a great teachable moment. So fun fact. So our peripheral vision, which is how they think that thanks. No more blinky. Whew, that was a lot. Oh no, it's still happening. Darn. I hate to do it. Can I ask you to turn off your video? And then when you're speaking, you can turn it back on, because I would much rather just see you. I just really do. It's so much more fun to get to see you. But I'll tell you something. So our peripheral vision is what they say is kind of helped us humans evolve, right? Like we saw the dinosaurs coming at us, and we went into this fight or flight. And what happens when we go into that fight or flight is our critical thinking stops going on, and our reptilian brain goes into action. And we start using our brains very differently, and we go into, fight or flight. And that peripheral vision also gets triggered by television. It's kind of fascinating. Yeah. So that means that when we're watching television, our capacity for critical thinking is not working in the same way as it would be if we were listening, or if we were seeing a still object that wasn't like moving nonstop. So a little strange and fun fact, and hopefully Corazon, you can come back. What a beautiful name, Corazon Strongheart. So this aspect of listening, I started to learn the responsibility of storytelling. I had a very dear friend who'd committed suicide in high school. And that place of home, of writing, of creativity, which was a place that had saved me through so many very challenging times in my life. My parents ended up divorcing. They moved from different cities to city. They stayed the same. I just moved between them. New kid in school. If any of you guys have had to be the new kid in school a lot, it just sucks. And books saved me. Stories were my safe place. They were my savior. They were the place that I could really just kind of escape everything else. And so when I went through that time of just deep grief and depression and sadness and confusion, I went to that place that was my safe sanctuary, which was writing. And so I wrote a play, and that play ended up getting produced in a playwriting festival, and I got to see it on the stage. And I was also an actress in it, so I also got to experience it that way. And I also learned the responsibility of storytelling then, because what you put out comes back. And so while I put out my grief and my upset and my confusion, then people that were in the same boat would bring me theirs. And I was like, oh, wow, this is a boomerang. There's a relationship that's happening here. As I mentioned, I learned the business of storytelling, in New York City, summer stock, all of that. But then I started to come into this space in my life where I was walking with a bigger question of how do we take this energy that I've been seeing and cultivating, and how do we really, how do we use it? I wanted to know, how do we use that energy that we're building? I ended up working with youth at risk for many years, and I went on to get a master's in social work and went into community organizing. And at that particular moment, I was weaving these threads of life between social justice, environmental justice, caring for the earth. And I knew that I really wanted to be a part of, at that time, saving the planet. And those were the words that we used. Now what I would say is be a part of reconnecting the disruption, reconnecting the disconnect that's happened between humans and our earth. And to me, this is what storytelling does. It brings us right back to the center. But before, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before all that, I moved to San Francisco. I I worked for Al Gore's television network, and I produced and hosted the Green Channel there, where I got to play a role in being at the very center of the climate communications movement around climate change. How do we communicate that's happening in this changing world? And something very profound happened there. I called myself this great synthesizer. I would take on all this information, and my recipe for success was, what is the information that I can give people to get to inspiration that would bring them to motivation, to then activation. That's what I wanted to do. And looking at all the data, because we could do that. It was the first television network that was also had online. I saw that I was asking the wrong question, because people weren't looking for the information. They were watching the stories, or maybe they were looking for information, but what they actually watched were stories. And something about that kind of gave me the golden key to escape, that it wasn't going to be in this realm of over there. It wasn't going to be through news and information that was going to change anything, that it was really going to be going to the source of the story, the source of who we are as storytellers, as humans living at this time, that could be the very core place where we go for this healing of this disruption. And there's a key story that I'll share right now that I heard many, many years ago. And it's of these two men that were in their canoes, and they're going down the river, and it's a beautiful day, and the sun's out, and it's just, glimmering off the surface of the river. Those days where everything is nice and smooth and sweet. And all of a sudden, this baby comes down, beside the canoe in the river. So they scoop it up. And then another baby comes down the river, and they scoop that one up. And before they know it, 2 babies, 3 babies. The river's getting filled with babies, and they're just getting bunches of babies in their arms and pulling them into the canoe. The canoe's filling with babies. One of the guys gets out of the canoe, and he starts walking upriver. The other guy that's left in the canoe says, "Wait, what are you doing? There's more babies in the river. We gotta save all of them." And he says, "No, I gotta get to the source of the problem." And so when I was walking with this great question of how do we tend to the times that we're living in, and how do we get to the source? To me, the source lives in how we work with our language, how we work with the stories, who we are as storytellers, where that defines how we live, how we love, and how we get to experience life itself. So that's a little bit of my introduction. I've walked for a long time in very wild, beautiful places with big stories, and have had some rare opportunities in life to really sit and really, really listen. And in the space of that, I've written a great big novel. And I always like to say I've studied with some really profound teachers. I've gotten to be in the room with Michael Mead and Carolyn Casey and Joanna Macy. And I was lucky. I was in a place where all these teachers were gathering. And Stephen Jenkinson, I studied at Orphan Wisdom School, and with Ariel, this is horrible. The 13 Moon. I'm perimenopausal. We forget things. It's just not fair. R.L. Spilsberg with a 13 Mystery School. And all of these teachers wholeheartedly informed what I'll be bringing to you today. But if I really want to be honest and clear with you about one of the greatest teachers where I really learned a lot of what I'm sharing today from the deep knowing in my bones, it was really from sitting with a big story for a very long time and really listening and allowing that story to teach me about what is a story and what is it to be a storyteller in our times. And the other piece I would just bring into this is that I think that's enough. Let's go on. Let's begin. So, okay. There are many, many ways of looking at stories and words. And so let's begin with some of the greatest, oldest words that we have on our planet. And oh gosh, my webinar just disappeared. She just flat out left me. Luckily, I know a lot of this, but I would like to pull it up because it helps guide me. So some of the oldest words on our planet. I'm sorry, guys, I actually have to pull this up because it will keep me on track with you and focuses the mind. There we go. So the Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful that they can raise enough energy to slow the world or set it into motion. And if you've ever had a chance to see the hula, I strongly recommend it. It's one of the most beautiful things to see in the world. And what you're seeing is a culture that's still alive, and the commitment to keep the practice alive of what it is to be an embodied prayer. And that's what hula is. It's an embodied prayer. And when you speak to Hawaiians, they know very well they can call to the clouds, they can call to the rain. This is not some kind of fictional fantasy of some long time ago. This is like right now, right here in this present time, a culture that still knows the power of their word. Sicilians believe that words poke holes in the universe. And I always think about that when I get a little angry or the temperature starts to rise. And I think, oh gosh, I can't ever take anything back. Maybe if I'm with people that know how to repair, we can repair, but I can't ever take it back. And that's not to say bite your tongue, because God knows the Sicilians don't bite their tongues, but I think they know a thing or two about the power of what happens once it's all released. You can poke holes in the universe. The Australians say that stories of the past must be sung to the present in order for the future to exist. The Maori say that the words don't describe a thing, they are the thing. In Japan, there's a word called kotodama, and it's a term that means word spirit, and it refers to the original divine spirit of the word before it even enters the world of thought waves. So the significance of kotodama is that the words are alive and have the power to create. And then there's abracadabra, a word from ancient Aramaic mysticism. I create as I speak. It's one of the oldest words on the planet. And all of the ancient religions agree, love this, all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I'm going to read that once more because it's I'm from the East Coast, and Linda understands that we have a little aspect of cynicism. Do you have that? Like we just don't take it all as if it is, where we have critical thinking minds, and we just like to study things a little bit more, and so this sounds a little bit like that, like hokey pokey, new age, California stuff. I get to say that because I live in California now, but this is ancient wisdom. And when I first got my hands on this, I was like, oh my God, this is, I feel like one of the key pieces that explains kind of my existence on this planet. That all of the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. So if there's ever that moment where you're wondering, why am I here? What am I doing here? This is one of those really beautiful moments where you can say, oh God, I am speaking this reality, speaking this world into reality. And again, it sounds like hokey pokey new age stuff to me, but I want to give you some more ancient, like really old. This is proof that this is old, that this is old, not ungrounded. This is a beautiful poem that comes from the Inuit. It was translated by Edward Fields. It's called Magic Words. In the very earliest time, when both people and animals lived on Earth, a person could become an animal if he wanted to, and an animal could become a human being. Sometimes they were people, and sometimes animals, and there was no difference. All spoke the same language. That was the time when words were like magic. A human mind had mysterious powers. A word spoken by chance might have strange consequences. It would suddenly come alive, and what people wanted to happen could happen. All you had to do was say it. Nobody could explain this. That's just the way it was. So can you imagine if every word, everything that you said came into being? And can you imagine, sometimes I just wonder, wow, what happened? What happened between then and now? Did we use too many words? It'd be a great story. If you're looking for a creative prompt, here's your creative prompt for the day. You know, who was the one who used too many words that broke the spell of words having meaning? You know, that would be that could be an interesting wonder. And it goes through, Starhawk. I now, as you know, have a school for sacred storytelling, and Starhawk was once our guest teachers, and she said something that I had lived, but she articulated it. She said, whenever I have a big question, I take it to the story. And there's a great quote, there's more truth in fiction, and so if you're, again, another creative prompt, if there's something deep that you're quandering and you're holding and it's just not making sense, I always suggest taking it into the realm of the stories, because we can take it and we can place it into another dimension, into this mythic dimension, which we're going to talk a little bit about. And we can sometimes get more insight, more perspective, and there's a lot more voices speaking to us than just our ego mind. And that's one of the things that storytelling gives us access to. It gives us an escape from just the human experience, and it brings us into deep communion with the unseen world. The imagination is a complete mystery. Like, nobody really knows where it's all from. Like, we understand how to get to space, we know how to get to the deep ocean, but like this right here, like our home turf, is still kind of like this wild a wild thing that no one fully understands. And so this is that moment when it's like, when we come into the realm of story, we enter into this imaginal planes, we enter into the mythic dimension. And as we enter into those places, now we have access to the unseen world. And that unseen world can be filled with all different kinds of things. Some might call it guides, some might call it angels, some might call it deities, the spirits of the earth, could be the muse or the spirit of life itself. But there's an opportunity for deep communion in the space of the creative life force. And this creative life force, it's at the center of everything, right? I could say, well, I'm creating a story, but it's the same energy that creates life as a human. So let's start going into what is a story. Let's come back to very pragmatic. Okay, we took you all the way out there. Let's come back here. What is a story? This is an interactive. I'd love to hear your voices, or you could also pop in comments into the chat box, and let's just get into it. Let's get on the same page. What is it? What is a story? There's no wrong answer. You can't get this wrong, just so you know. You're just feeding our collective conversation. Really? You just want me to keep talking? I mean, I can keep talking. This is usually like people enjoy a little bit of interaction. Yes, okay. Linda.
Mute. Well, a story is a created space. It's a space. It's like a realm where like you're living life and then you enter a story. It's like you enter a dimension, a different dimension maybe.
Mhm. So a story is a different dimension. Oh, it's like a keyhole. Yeah, I'm like, we'll think about that. We'll think of, I mean, it is kind of amazing because we go somewhere else when we go to a story, right? So it's like stories have their own worlds, and even within those worlds, they have their own rules. It's like, as storytellers, we're world builders. So in one of my books that I've been working on, which is magical realism, we've had to learn all the rules for this new world. But right, so it's like there's the other realms, and just isn't that kind of amazing that we can just like build a whole other reality together?
Yes.
Here, Tara is saying a story is an out breath. Without a story, there is randomness. Story is making sense in reality, right? So story, it's like stories help us make meaning. And that's a really critical piece I want to speak to, because we're living in the information age and people think that information makes meaning. Information does not make meaning. And our bodies actually, our brains, as our human brains, were not actually designed to make meaning out of data. So if you're ever in a room and you get to hear people send out a lot of data, all the energy goes whoosh, and a lot of people can't do it because we're not designed that way. However, if you tell a story, stories help us make meaning. They help us make sense of what's going on. And here's a little interesting part, that if you listen to different stories in the classes that I teach, we used to start every single class where everyone had to tell one of the old creation stories. They had to go find one. And the reason why we start this way is because once you tell enough creation stories, these are the original stories, the rhythm, you start to feel the rhythm of story again in your body. And you're like, oh, right, I know that old friend. And you just can't help but start telling story, But in these old stories, we were in a situation where Joseph Campbell has been a great influencer over our time. And the hero's journey has kind of overly influenced the way of Western movie making. And that's a really fascinating conversation that we could spend an entire class on. And in our library, actually, in the School for Sacred Storytelling, in our Master Teacher Library, there's an amazing class by Bayo Akafat, and he teaches all about this. But the piece that I want to speak to is that in our current model of storytelling, we like to solve every problem. We like that, especially in American Western storytelling, we like to have everything in a bow, wrapped up in a bow, and happy ending. Okay. But in a lot of the older stories, there's actually room for mystery. There are parts of the story that make no sense. There are parts of the story that are just truly mysterious, and mystery actually plays a role in the story. And in these ways, it's like they were given good, it's like they were, when they're the stories were the teachers, they were holding the toolbox that were given to young people for how to live in the world. And those stories gave them the tools, and so they would have the skills. And one of them that they recognized was being able to be present with mystery, being present with the unknown. And now look at our times, all the stories that we tell, there's no mystery. There's not much space for the unknown. And think about the terror that so many people went through, these last couple of years, because we're just dealing with so many unknowns, and that were we given the skills to manage that kind of mystery, and I think about what, different times in the world gave their humans through what lived through their stories. Anything else in terms of what is a story? I'll give you one more piece. So a story is a little bit what I was just talking about. It's also, we often understand ourselves through the latest technology. So we understand ourselves oftentimes as machines, So I'm going to continue on that way. And I'm going to call story as an operating system. And in that, stories teach us our values, our belief systems, and what we believe is possible. So think about the stories that you were read as a child. Think about the stories that you were watching, think about the stories that you were watching. Think about the movies that you were watching. Think about the stories that were being told around the table. Stories about who gets to be successful, who doesn't. Stories about rich people, poor people. Stories about who gets to be rich, who gets to be poor. Stories about love, romance. I was a child of the 80s. Do you know how much deprogramming I had to do from all the Brat Pack movie telling? I really thought romance was supposed to look a certain way. I had to really come back and be like, whoa, hold on. That was fiction, So really, this is an opportunity to, like, when we start thinking about where was that? So that's one of the things. I was walking through where I live in Topanga Canyon, California, and I was on my morning walk, and I swear to God, the trees were like, Leah, you got to stop calling stories operating systems. And I'm like, I know, I'm just trying to explain. The trees are like, yeah, They're libraries of the souls. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a much better explanation. That a story is a library of the soul. And it's kind of this amazing thing because stories can grow with us. They can grow as they're passed along. They can change, they can transform. They can heal us through the telling of them. And when you really study a story, you will understand that that story will tell you everything about the time and place from which it was created. There's one other key rule about a story that's really important. And I'll finish this thought first though. In terms of that, it will tell you about what can be said and what can't be said. It will tell you about the rules of society. It will tell you about how people see each other. So when you're studying these old stories, it's really critical to really understand that they were told in a certain time, they were created in a certain time. Now, the other thing about a story is that a story comes from a place. It comes from a place. That's a really great thing. If you want to stand at the threshold of sacred storyteller and look at the lens of our times, I feel like this is a really critical tool. Meaning that you'll always understand a story from where it comes from. So if you're trying to distinguish where something, like if something is real or something is fiction, or if it's right or wrong, as a sacred storyteller, your way of orienting your compass to north is very simple. Where is that story from? Where was it born from? What was the creator in service to? These are very simple questions that you can always ask that will distinguish yourself as a storyteller, as just an information grabber. You know, Corazon, were you coming on to say something about stories?
Yes.
Great. What did you want to say? Oh, but you muted yourself.
Okay, got me?
Yes.
Hi, honey.
Hi.
I'm what is referred to as a slider, so I affect everything electrical. So computers, phones, Apple Watches, everything. I'm really sorry. That's part of my story that I want to tell. So
Okay.
I'm back to muting myself, so everything goes wacky around me, like batteries drain and charge and stuff. So that's what happened.
I
I'm
believe it.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. It's just what is. It's just what
Yeah,
is.
yeah. So that's the thing. But I'm listening. I'm getting a lot of information. So thank you. I'm here with you. I just don't want to interrupt and mess up your feed.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, honey.
You're welcome. All right. You know, what a beautiful also expression is like, this is the story I'm in, right? That's what she just gave us. Ah, this is the story I'm in. And, you know, if I could offer anything, and like, why apologize? You know, I'm going to give you a story that might give you another aspect of delight. A friend of mine is a music video producer. Yeah. And it's like such an old term. We don't use it anymore. And he was producing a David Bowie music video, and you know they got everything all set up, and they call him in, and he comes in, and the second he walks in, the huge $10,000 light, I can't believe they make them $10,000 light bulbs, but apparently they do, blows. And everyone on set, the producers are freaking out. They're like, oh my God, you know, we're so sorry, blah, blah, blah. And his assistant goes, don't worry, it happens every time he walks in the room. So you weren't alone. Some people just hold very powerful, energetic presences. Okay, so we have our hands around a story, and what is a story? And there's one other thing I want to talk about stories, because they're so cool, right? So you know, all this investment in VR and AI and all that, and that's great. That's where the world's going. And this, you know, this kind of desire to be able to transport together and share things together. And I'm going to take you on a journey right now. So once upon a time, not so far away and not so long ago, at the very, very bottom of the ocean was a very, very, very big, bigger than big, humongous green snake. And this green snake was slowly making his way down the bottom of the river. And there was an elephant that was standing right on top, 2 legs, where the snake was going right in between. And on top of that elephant was a very small girl wearing little pink fairy wings with their little pink princess skirt, with little gold dust coming off her hands and off her hair. Okay, so how many of you were able to see that image? Okay, yes, so I'm getting hands up, yes. So what we just did is we location traveled together, we reality bended. Did you have a hard time holding your breath being underwater that long? I hope not, because it was just a natural place to be, right? So we shape shifted. And we did all that together. Like we went there together. It's kind of wild. Like we co-created a reality together with the simple technology of a heartbeat. It's kind of wild. And through that heart speaking resonance, and when that image started to come alive, the right lobe of my brain started to get super active, and it was going like beep, 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 and all these images are coming in. And at the exact same moment, the right lobe of your brain is going beep, 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 and we are literally, even across time and space, creating a reality together. So when you talk about who are some of the most powerful people on the planet, it's not the storyteller. It is. I mean, storytellers are good. We've got a lot. It's the listeners. It's because the listener is the garden of consciousness. And you are the one that will determine what stories live inside you. What story will you allow into this extraordinary vehicle of your beingness? Looks like I froze there for a second. Right. So it's like a magic trick that, yes, storytellers have tremendous power. We have tremendous influence. We can plant seeds in people's consciousness, but at the end, in the middle, the beginning of the day, it all has to do with how cultivated, how strong is the garden that we plant these ideas in, these stories and these concepts in. And that capacity is a whole other skill, that we could spend an entire class on, but we're not going to go too deep into that today, but I'm just leaving that there for something for you to consider. And for you to also just consider, what stories will you carry? That's how powerful you are. So what's a sacred story? What is a sacred story? And again, there's no way to get this wrong. We're just thinking about things together out loud. What is a sacred story?
Can I speak?
Yes.
Every story is a sacred story, isn't it?
I don't know. Okay, so in your world, every story is a sacred story. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. Linda?
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's okay. Maybe a sacred story is a story that is like a story that has, I don't know how to describe it, but a story that has weight, that has importance, or like that has a message to carry over to the next generation, or I don't know, to the people, the younger people, or something that needs to be shared in order to continue something. That's how I see it.
So sacred story, there's a little bit of a mission, I hear you saying.
Yeah.
It's doing something. It's carrying something forward. Okay. So one of the ways that I think about sacred, and like, what is this word? It's like, what makes something sacred? And what are we saying? And we're saying, I see the divine in you. I see the life in you. And so when we're saying something's a sacred story, we're saying, I see the divinity in you. I see the life inside of you that's living in this story. But it's not just any life that I see. I see a life in service to life itself. So a sacred story, when I feel a sacred story, I feel a little pep in my step. I feel lighthearted. Maybe I've grieved and I've been able to release tears I couldn't access. Maybe you've taken me to the edge of the corner to see some of the hardest parts about what humans are capable of, but then you guided me back with knowledge and insight and tools for how to for warnings, you know. So just so you know, in Welsh, the old word for storyteller is guide, guide between the dimensions. And so a sacred story, it's here to do good, you know. And when I hear a story, like, I always know that I just feel a little pep in my step. I feel a little happier. I feel like, okay, I'm going to exercise longer tomorrow, and I'll put caffeine and sugar, and yay, life, I'll be great in life. You know, you've heard a great story, right? The opposite of a sacred, and you're like, okay, yeah, I've seen those. Okay. And then, like, what's the opposite? So the opposite to me is a zombie story. And a zombie story is a life eater. And I really want you to start looking around and noticing the zombie stories, because I think we're kind of under attack right now in a world of just not in service to life. Oops. There we go. This is just being patient with things. I don't know where I left you, but what I'll say is a zombie story is a story that's not in service to life. And so an example of one is, and a zombie story, to me, what does that look like? It means it's a story that plants fear, that it plants divisiveness, that it takes us further apart than brings us together. So I really want to invite you, as you know, if you're coming to the Threshold of Sacred Storyteller, it's an amazing tool for how to guide us through these times. And sometimes it can be as simple as, when people are coming at you in all directions from all these different things, is this story bringing me closer to others, or is it ripping me apart? Is it spreading fear, or is it spreading love? Is it bringing us closer into communion, or is it creating separation and divide? And this is one more tool, one more thing that you can access, you know, in a way that you can navigate these times that we're in when we're under, you know, the siege of information. So an example of a zombie story is Jaws. Jaws was, what do we do? We always go back to the creator. You know, the creator was Peter Benchley was the author of the book. Steven Spielberg picked it up. It was his third movie that he ever made, but his first big blockbuster. What does he want? He wants to be known as a big famous director. We know that, and he had an eye for a story that would make us look. You know, and we can talk more about this. Again, to understand a story is to understand the time that it was in, and we weren't exposed to a lot of violence at that time. This was in the mid-70s. There was not a lot of violence happening. And the other aspect that was there is that this was the first film that was ever shot in the open ocean. Now, the ocean, do we have any symbol readers among us? Anyone know what the ocean symbolizes? It can symbolize a lot of different things: emotional life, consciousness, you know. And so we have this movie that's filmed in the open ocean. The big Jaws breaks, the big prop breaks. They're smart filmmakers. They just decide to show pieces of it. You know, they can just show pieces of the prop. So now what's happening? Like, maybe you don't speak the most ancient language of story, which is symbol. And I'm just going to rewind one moment, which is that the language of story is symbol, myth, metaphor, and archetype. And so that's its language. So when you go to France, you speak French. When you go to Spain, you speak Spanish. When you go to the land of story, you got to speak symbol and metaphor. It's how it's speaking to you. And so here we are in this movie, and now we see the symbol of shark representing death. What is the very first story ever written, Gilgamesh? What is it all about? Humans' fear of death. This is old, right? Our fear of death. And now the shark comes on as this great symbol of death planted right into our consciousness, right? And how many people became deathly afraid of sharks for generations to come? Massive kill-offs. And what do we know about sharks now? That most of them are kind of like dogs, that most of them are pretty harmless and really don't want to be around us. You know, that there's a couple out there, you know, that kind of have some issues, but like in general, and they're a keystone species, and more people die each year from coconuts getting hit on the head than sharks. It's just a whole thing, but the level of fear that's still there. And when Peter Benchley realized what his story had done to the collective consciousness, he spent the rest of his life working as an ocean steward to protect the oceans. So this is a cautionary tale, because I don't think that we have a bunch of people intentionally trying to be zombie storytellers. But I do think that there's a lot of people out there who are not aware of the power of their voice and the capacity of what a story can do with or without your intention. So this is the majority of our class today. What I'll do is I'll tell you a short little story now. And then I'm going to tell you, and then our class will be complete. And if you feel inclined to learn about a couple of other opportunities that are happening, including a 4-week class on vision stories, which was one of my favorite classes is coming up, and a retreat in Crete, I'll stay on for a couple extra moments and I'll talk about those courses. So this is a story. This story was given to me. It's one of the very few stories that I carry, and that isn't my own. So there's many different kinds of storytellers. Some people are, they carry the old stories, and some of us are catching the new stories. And so, and somewhere in between, we probably all carry a couple of stories. And I was at this women's retreat, this Buckhorn Women's Retreat, run by an amazing woman named Dot. And it was one of those open source, open forum where anyone could offer something. And I was very new and young to my path. And I was making my commitment to be a sacred storyteller when I was there. And there was there was an older woman who was teaching a class on storytelling. So of course I went. And she told me, all of us, she said, I'm going to give you a story. And I had no idea that a story could be a present, that it could be a gift that could then be carried. So I give that to you too. I wish I could tell you her name. I don't know her name. I've tried so hard to find her. I don't know who she is, where she comes from, where she lives, but I do hold her story, and I carry it to give to you today. The story is about her grandmother, who was in Auschwitz. And she was in a room with 6 other women, and they were starving. And she could see that there was a level of famish that was happening that was beginning to threaten their existence. And she knew she had to do something. She wanted to do something. And so she took the one last thing of any kind of physical value that she had, which was her wedding ring, which had been sewn into her jacket. And she went to the guard. And she made a deal with him that she would give him her ring, and that he would bring back 6 eggs. He went, he came back, he brought 4 eggs. That's all that they were, he said. So she had this decision to make. She looked at the 4 eggs. She looked at the 6 women. How is she going to decide who would eat and who wouldn't? How could she possibly feed the hunger when there wasn't enough food? And perhaps because she asked that question, another kind of answer came. And on that day, they separated the egg yolks from the whites of those eggs, and they sat on their beds and they gave each other facials, because she fed them another kind of nourishment that day. She gave them their humanity back. So that is the story for you today. And so if you feel complete, I wish you well and on your way. And if you'd like to stay, I'm going to share a little bit more information about ways that you can come into telling stories and telling your own stories. So let us, I'll go and I'll tell you about that. So one of the classes that's coming up is called Vision Stories. And this is a really exciting class. And in this class, it's, and I'll just share a little bit. I'll give you the link right here. And this is a really cool class. This was a class that I actually developed while at an artist retreat in Hawaii many years ago. And the way that it works is it's really all about planting the seeds for a future. You know, really, our future's kind of been hijacked. We're in a situation, you know, and this is a moment where we have an opportunity to make sure that the world that we most want to be living in is existing. But first, we've got to be able to tell the story. We have to be able to not just tell a story, we have to get to listen to the story and imagine the story. And so this is a 4-week class. It's a creative intensive. You're going to have an opportunity to be in communion with other people who, to me, it's like, I love these classes. And mostly the reason I love them is because the people that come into them, they're all in one way or another, just saying yes to life, yes to their creative life force, yes to being in that zing that happens when we're really opening and playing our creative channel. And this is a unique class that's unlike any other, because in this class, you're going to really, you know, we talked about that mythic dimension, that space. We're going to have an opportunity to go into that space of deep listening to really see what is it that we're seeing that's possible in our future. And then how do we come back to tell the story and create this really unique kind of story? This is also a great class for anyone that likes to facilitate groups, that are teachers, where I'll often do this. I'll start playing, if I'm with a group of people and they're getting into the doldrums of like, oh, the world sucks and everything's horrible, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, let's create a vision story. And so it's a really fun thing. It also gives you a very concrete tool that you can take and you can play with anyone else. And like in 15 minutes or less, you could have influenced the field, the experience that everyone's having, by bringing them into a space of tapping into their imagination, tapping into the mythic dimension, and then cultivating our truest genius by listening to the steps that need to happen between here and there. So it's again, you'll get to practice storytelling, you'll get to practice being in your mythic imagination, you'll have an opportunity to really listen for, you know, what is it to be a storyteller in our unique time when we're sitting here with so much stress and pressure on our shoulders about what's to come. The truth is that when we say what's about to come, we're casting spells. It's how powerful our words are. And nothing has happened yet. We're right here. We're right here. And everything that is about to come will result based on what we do from right here. Crisis. This is a fun one. Crisis is actually, I believe it's in the Chinese characters, it's where opportunity meets danger. In the Greek words, it means it's a choice point. It's a place of discernment, of making a decision. That's what a crisis is. So when we understand that we're in a beautiful place of decision making, you know, now we have an opportunity to say, okay, what is the story I most want to live? Knowing the power of my words can plant that into the now so that it can be a pathway for others to grow into the future. Martin Luther King Jr. did it, right? I had a dream. Wow, look what that did, you know. So, okay, that was a vision story. So you'll have an opportunity to create your own vision story, build confidence, you get to play, you get to have your own private small group that you work with. The other extraordinary benefit that when you come into the class, I can't believe it's not even on here. You know, storytelling is my first skill, marketing my 10th skill, but we're missing something very key here, which is really delightful, which is that you also get access to our amazing School for Sacred Storytelling private world. I'm going to try to bring you into this world. Sorry, let's see here. And what you're seeing here is these are you have all these classes, and you'll have an opportunity to learn about new things coming up, but you also get access to our places where our living library, where you will get to see, sorry guys, I'm having a hard time just finding the goods to show you because there's so much. Here we go. This is our living library. and where we have all these guest classes from all these amazing guest teachers that have come throughout the time. So it's like getting 108 hours of content while also just signing up for one class. You get to benefit from all of those who come before you. A true example, living example of what a great story is. You also get to be part of our reading club, which is we meet once a month. And you're like, how can I join it for once a month? We just read one chapter a month out of this book. And it's really great. And it's according to each chapter and according to the month. So you'll have an opportunity to join us for March. And then we also have a writing and community class, which is every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We meet and we write for an hour, and I give a creative prompt, or someone else does. And so that's a benefit of being in the school. But you could also, if you don't want the class, but you actually just want the benefit of the membership, you can just come and join for the membership. It's $33 a month. The other thing that, in terms of storytelling classes, the other thing that we have is Cantadora. So that's coming up afterwards. And this is, how do you carry an old story? So vision stories, you get to access your own creative imagination. Cantadora, you get to learn what is it to carry an old story. And so you'll get to hear these old stories from all around the globe, and you'll get to carry them. And it's just a really fun, wonderful class. And when you sign up for both of them, you get a crazy deal. You get them both off at the early bird rate. And we also have payment plans. So if the class is what you want, we've found many ways to make it possible for you to come in, no matter where you sit today with your financial situation. Any questions so far? I'm going to show you two other things that are just super wonderful and fun. Okay, so that's that. The other thing I'm going to show you is the Bloom Collective. And this is for people who, the storytelling classes are people who really want to access their creative life force, and they want a place to practice, and they want a place to build confidence, and they want to be in a community of people who are really looking for their greatness and are really helping to come build up. So that's great. And there comes this moment when you're like, I got something to put out into the world, and I want to bring it out really far, and I want to do it. And that's the Bloom Collective. And the Bloom Collective is a conscious creators collective where we meet twice a month. And it's for people who have something that they want to bring into the world. And so people are working on articles, they're working on books. Some people are launching businesses. Some people are launching new websites. It's not just for writers. It's really for creatives. I've got a television show. There's all different kinds of things. And it's sort of like you get to come in and you get to not only have an accountability group, people that are holding you to your creative vision, reminding you of it when you come into the story if you're too busy, helping you keep your commitment to yourself, helping you tend to the blocks and barriers. But we're doing something a little bit of magic too, where you get to actually come in and each week share what you're doing and get our attention on you, get our focused attention. And I'm going to use this word, and it's going to bring up all different kinds of things depending on where you are. But our prayers, our goodwill on what you're creating in the world. And as a creative, I've found that's one of the most important things to be able to have that field of people who are around you, who've got your back, and they're like, I've got your back. I want you to do well. And even in those moments when you're scared and you're feeling doubt and you're criticizing everything that you've done, because we all go through these moments, that you will be able to thrive and succeed. And people who want that for you. So you get an accountability group. There's mentorship. I'll show you who our mentorship is. Our next mentor is going to be Betsy Chaucy. And she'll be teaching us on the business of storytelling. So if you haven't paid enough attention to the economics that it takes in terms of having a creative career, she's going to be great in terms of offering that. Tad is going to be talking about marketing, niche marketing. Bobby already came through and visited us, and her class is there, and she's talking about how to remove blocks and barriers. And Dominique is also going to be coming in and teaching us Haikomi techniques about blocks and barriers and things like that. So that is the Bloom Collective. The next opening to join us is on March 10th. And we meet on Thursdays, I And I can show you, I'll give you guys that link as well. And the final thing I'll just tell you, there's so many options. And I'll tell you that I'm actually going to be not be teaching that much after May, because most of my teaching is going to be in person. And so we're hosting a retreat, a women's retreat that is going to Crete in May. And this is a rites of passage retreat. And it's really to really acknowledge that so many of us are being initiated by life, but don't have the structures in place to be able to have us be able to call on the most ancient technology of humaning, which is being able to go through these passages. Now in our current language upgrading, or moving through the clock of archetypes is another way of discussing it. But these massive initiations, when we don't have the presence of rites of passage, when we don't have this capacity to be held and to be guided through them, and to have people help us drop our old clothes, to drop our old ways, to release that which is ready to die and retire, so that this new expression of life can come in as we grow and age, then a lot of times we can end up in a kind of a stunted society. And then what also can happen is that these extraordinary opportunities where life is trying to strengthen us, if we don't have those guides there, if we don't have the process there, then we miss the medicine of the moment. So cancer can be an initiation. Health crisis can be initiation. Divorces are initiations. Houses burning down. All these things that you didn't quite choose, but life chose for you. These can be opportunities where you can find aspects and strengths in your soul that you had no idea were there until the moment arrived for you to experience them. But if you don't have a place to cultivate them and call them all the way up, a community to hold you in that process, then other things happen. So it's happening to us and for us and through us all the time. But this course is completely designed to support you through that. And so if that's something that you're interested in, we're beginning right now. We won't go till May, but we're starting our preparation right now. And you can just email info@leahlam. And that's that. That was a lot. That was a lot. Anything else?
May I ask you a question?
Of course,
Great. Do you mentor one-on-one?
I do.
Okay, great. And I can just contact you privately regarding that?
Yeah, you can just email me. Going through info@leahlam is good, or you can go to leah@leahlam. And
Okay.
I do with people one-on-one.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question. I saw on your I think your website that you have the Sacred Storyteller course. Is that still going on, or has it ended, or am I on time for it?
Yeah, so Vision Stories, so that was a 1.5-year program, and it's
Okay.
split up into 4 all different modules. And so I can actually talk to you about it, because there's 2 different ways that you could participate in that. And so let me, I'm going to show you
There's a funny light coming in.
that. Oh, you do have a,
It's
have a,
beautiful, but I can't see anything anymore. Okay.
oh, okay. Let me show you, I'll show you a little bit about the School for Sacred Storytelling.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yes. So I'll come over here. So this was a 1.5-year long program, and it started about 1 year and 2 months ago. And I've taught online for about 5 years now. And the thing that I discovered in doing this is that people were often able to come for some of it, but the long haul of studying on Zoom for a really long time, very, very few had that. And I was more interested in how could I really serve people exactly where they are, And so this program is designed to go through all the different chakras. So we have these 6-week creative intensives, and then we have 6 different storytelling modalities that I teach.
Oh, okay, I see.
And so where we are right now is we're up to vision stories.
Okay, I see.
And then we'll do Cantadora. And
All right.
what I can say is that they do build on each other, but they were also all designed to be standalone classes. So you're right on time to join us for this last two parts. And then at some point it will begin again. And I'm now having, I'll be teaching some of them. I have a facilitation training program. And so they'll be teaching some of them. What I'll share about this, what did I want to show you? Oh, is that you can also take all these classes, you can do the recordings on your own. And
Okay.
yeah, so when you join the School for Sacred Storytelling, I'll just show you this over here. When you go to memberships, you'll see, let's see if I can pull this up. I don't know if I can. I think I can. Oh no, I don't want that. That's not what I want. Sorry. I'll just show you how to get there because it's a thing to see. This is going to confuse you. I think I'm just going to confuse you a lot. But basically, here you go. I think if you get, it's not the $33. You want the one that is study on your own storytelling.
I'm not sure.
What this does was this will give you, and there's one that's visible, and that will give you the recordings to study on your own. And also we do have facilitators that are coming in who will be facilitating different classes. And so that it will continue. I think yeah, I mean, but if you want to jump in, like jumping in for these last two courses, that will actually get you started, if that makes sense. And then it will be continuing again. Just not
Okay.
sure exactly when the next one's going to start. So
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
you're
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
You're welcome. Welcome. Okay. Any other questions?
I'm good.
Okay, great. Have a good day.
Thank you so much, Leah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.